We have another week of hot takes for Overwatch 2. Remember to submit yours in the comments. Started off with hot takes. Don't write too many lines. Too much of a paragraph means I probably won't read it. Keep it nice and succinct. Here we go. First hot take of this week is Roadhog's rework made him the new "nothing's working, I'm going hog." It's worse than Orisa and Mauga. He might not even be getting picks. He simply gets free value out of your tank, being imprisoned and never dying himself. It's terrible to play against. I have found in Diamond and Plat lobbies, the enemy team just goes hog when they're losing and my team often loses. Zen is really the most oppressive thing to hog right now, but if the hog's DPS are on an anti-Zen comp, it's GG's. I would say the rework initially wasn't a bad idea, but they buffed him like 3 straight times ever since. Like the Pigpen rework was fine. You wanted like a 2-part combo where if you really wanted to guarantee the one shot, you had to throw him onto the Pigpen. But since then, they made it so Roadhog's hook, instead of keeping them 4 meters away after the hook, they're 3 meters away, which means they're closer. So if you do a little step forward and shoot, you can almost pretty much kill a 250 HP hero right now on Roadhog. That coupled with the take a breather, working pretty nicely with the what's it called, the headshot damage reduction that was added for tanks last week, and made Roadhog really oppressive this patch. So I would say the initial rework, he was okay. He was like pretty subpar, but like below average at high ranks, but like pretty manageable at medium ranks. But like the thing with Roadhog is he's all or nothing. He's either just bad or he's really good or too good. And he's right now he's in the really good bucket, despite the small hotfix nerfs he just recently got last week. After the midseason patch with his take a breather, I'd still say he's pretty damn good, especially in solo queue. The hook punishing people, because if they're not, they have no lick of armor, which is any squishy hero. You do a lot of damage. It's true that Hog, if he does hook like an armor target, the armor does reduce the pellets of his shotgun quite a bit, but he's still really good in like the Doom matchup. Pretty good against Ramatra. I know he has some armor, but like you can annoy him, you can annoy Queen, and he's very hard to kill. You say Discord Orb is one of the good answers to it, and it's true. And you said if Hog's DPS are an anti-Zen comp, it's GG's. That's also sort of true, because like Tracer is very good against Zen, and Tracer is in every game, so that it's hard to play Zen. So in the other times that the other supports you can play against Hog are probably BAP or Ana. But even with Ana, the anti-nade doesn't last as long anymore. It's only like 3 seconds or whatever instead of 4. Same with Sleep Dart having a lower effect on tanks. And then you have Kiriko on the Hog's team, which is Suzu's it, so it's GG's. So oftentimes for me, if I'm playing against a Hog, I usually switch to Baptiste, because like he's a bit safer than Zen and doesn't have all the shit cleansed by Kiriko, like no anti or sleep. I just DPS the shit out of the Hog. But now that Hog has headshot reduction, I can't even hit him as effectively as before. So I wouldn't say your take isn't wrong. It's like the rework, it wasn't the rework, it's actually all the supplemental buffs they've given him since. So anyways, I'm done rambling about Hog. I think they need to nerf Hog a little bit more. That's all I'm saying. Next hot take. The reason Overwatch is so toxic and hostile now is directly because of the scoreboard. 90% of the time I've been flamed were because my stats weren't as good as my other teammates, even if I'm doing my job. Players don't realize that the scoreboard doesn't accurately show how well you're doing. Widow, for example, always does low damage, but I'll get blamed for losing for my low damage, even though I got 1 to 2 picks every fight. It's a hot take because Overwatch has always been toxic and hostile. Any sort of live service PvP game, people will find random things to blame and use that as a scapegoat to justify that they're playing better than you. Right now, the scoreboard does make it a little more transparent, sure, but at the same time, Overwatch 1 with the old system, they'd be like, why do I have gold damage as so-and-so? That means you're not doing your job. Yes, you can kind of like keep the blame a little bit like not as individualized, because it's a bit more anonymous in that way, but like regardless, people will find ways to flame you anyways. So it might be a little more pronounced here, but yeah, I mean, you get blamed, but people will always find scapegoats for and never look within themselves. That's not new. And I think the scoreboard brings more good than bad, if I'm going to be honest with you. Next hot take. Almost all heroes released for Overwatch 2 have sucked or are fundamentally flawed. Junker Queen is fine, Venture is a little too early to judge, but Sojourn, server admin. Kiriko, everyone aside support players, Despiser. Ramatra, his ultimate and block need work. Lifeweaver literally just heals. Illari literally just DPS. Mauga is a bruh. I wouldn't say all here. I would say half of them are kind of like meh. The most fundamentally flawed amongst the new Overwatch 2 heroes is probably Mauga. And then Lifeweaver is like Like Mauga fundamentally like flawed by design, and he's either like an all or nothing. Lifeweaver is actually serviceable like below for like a majority of the player base, but just sucks at the high ranks. But the high ranks have the most like social media and influencer presence, so then it gets echoed that Lifeweaver is blah 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 blah, and then you know, people shit on Lifeweaver players. But I actually think Lifeweaver is serviceable at most ranks besides the high ranks. Illari's actually pretty cool. She is kind of just a DPS, but she's kind of like a unique support that is, you know, off-angle DPS with a little bit of heals in between. I think it's fine. You don't want too much homogenous heroes with too much overlap in abilities. You can, but at the same time, I think it's fine to have some just a more heal-focused support like Lifeweaver, or a more DPS-focused support like Illari. They will fill individual niches. These may not ever be super competitive viable, but they're, you know, it's important to serve a casual player base. The game is technically designed for casual. It's a free-to-play game. You want to attract the biggest audience and have the most retention and most skins purchased. So like, they have to make stuff for everybody, including heroes that some people feel need a rework but are actually accessible. Heroes like Moira, when they like try to complicate her a bit more, all the Moira mains are like, don't change her. Like, yeah, she may not be that popular or that very high skill ceiling, but I read a thread where someone had like a disability with their hand, but Overwatch is accessible because they have heroes that are very easy to play without like, you know, too much fine motor skills, and then they can enjoy the game casually. The problem is when these super simple heroes become the most OP ones, even at the highest competitive levels where higher skill ceiling is more prominent and higher skill representation is needed, then we run into problems. But at the end of the day, I think Lifeweaver's fine, Illari's fine. Sojourn was actually generally like, it's more pronounced on this season because everyone's more HP and building rail and all that stuff. But before then, besides like the season 1 or 2 Sojourn in the middle seasons, like season 3 to 8, where it was actually okay. Kiriko, understandably a little meh. Ramatra right now is actually kind of cool, I won't lie. I think he's fine. He's not even that popular at this current time. He's decent where he's decent, but is also like, you know, a nice shift between two forms. I think that's a very unique design. But amongst your list in Overwatch 2, Mauga and Kiriko. Next, take away the invincibility aspect of Suzu and it's balanced. I mean, it's not a terrible idea. Like, you don't need the invincibility. As long as you cleanse a negative effect, I think it does the job, and you still get the heal. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily balanced. People will still find something to pick at it because it is a very loaded ability, but I've said this in a previous hot takes video or a Reddit video. I don't know what video it was, but the biggest problem with Kiriko, to me, is actually Swift Step. That's like what makes her too good. 7-second, get out of jail free card, take free angles. You have wall climbs, you have vertical mobility, pressure people, teleport out, and then Suzu them immediately. Like, it's the combination of the Swift Step TP with the Suzu to save someone as well, and to get out of jail free card. That's like what's the most OP to me. It's frustrating when you like try to land an ability and like they accidentally, or they Suzu it when you like time the rocket punch. But like, Suzu is forcible, but the TP, the fact that it's free and way more higher frequency at 7 seconds is a bigger problem, but that's just me. But I don't disagree with this hot take where you take away the invincibility aspect. I think that's actually fine. You can do that for Kiriko. Wouldn't say it's balanced still, but it's a decent first step. It's impossible to remove toxicity from the game as it is simply a facet of any even slightly competitive team-based game. In a lot of these community-based opinion reactions videos, people are always suggesting ways to improve it, but devs have been trying for years and it might be becoming a lost cause. Overwatch is going for free-to-play has had a massive impact on this as well. Look at games like League and Val and how toxic they are. Ultimately, any game that gets big and has a competitive mode will likely end up being stereotyped as toxic because of how easily passions run high and the social importance within the games community of being high elo. I sort of agree. It's impossible to remove toxicity completely. There will always be toxic people no matter how much you try to do. There will always be bad actors in not only games, but just in life in general. You always have assholes, but it's still important to, you say it's a lost cause for the devs, but it's still important to continue to tackle it, because if you don't, then you let it run rampant and you don't strike down on people who are genuinely being, you know, really toxic in games. It is important to report them. It's important to action them so they can learn and hopefully learn from their actions, suffer the consequences, because, you know, you have to take accountability for what you've done, and hopefully the consequences are severe enough to help people learn their lessons. I'm all about people reforming and getting a little bit better in their gaming and in their life. But you're right, it's impossible to remove it completely, but we don't want to stop, you know, taking care of the problem by any means. Even if it's a lost cause, always try to strive to be better and continue working on anti-toxic tools and ways to mitigate it. Next hot take, Kiriko is a better DPS than some of the actual DPS, Plus, Suzu and ult is so good you can't blame people being sick of seeing her so often. I still don't think it's like Kiriko can be better in some 1v1 situations, but like as a whole, you're never gonna like, unless your Kiriko is like smurfing and really good in farming Roadhog like crazy. For the most part, Kiriko will not out damage a lot of the DPS heroes, and not even just damage, getting complete like final blows like a Widowmaker. Even if your Kiriko has more damage than your Widow or Sombra, like they're doing things in other ways. So yes, while Kiriko can have very strong DPS dueling aspects, I don't think she outclasses a DPS in the role of completely, you know, playing that, but she's one of the better ones for sure. I'd say if I had to classify the more DPS oriented supports, I think Illari is the better DPS than some of the actual DPS. That one for sure. Baptiste can farm a lot of damage as well, but it's usually chip damage. Same with Kiriko, but Illari is the true better than a lot of DPS heroes. But you're right, Suzu's good and Ultimate is good, so I don't blame people for being sick of seeing her. Next hot take, the continued removal and discontinuation of game modes that don't instantly take off is exactly why the player base keeps dwindling. Group mastery could have been so much more with a couple of extra months of TLC, for example, more map and special modifiers. So I think you're referring to the hero mastery gauntlet with the 3-player defense tower mode. I don't think that is why the player base is dwindling. I mean, if anything, they have the product stats. I would argue it's less than like 0.1% of the player population that actually plays the mode. They've publicly shown that most players, half the player population plays quick play, like 30 or 40% play competitive, 10% in arcade, and like the rest in like custom games and other modes. And like, I mean, I'm sure that most people played it on day one, finish their challenges, and never touch it again. You say it could have been so much more, but you might be one of that small 0.1% player population that really enjoyed it. And I feel for you. It sucks to have it completely removed. Why not just keep it in the game? But I think they don't want to like overcloud their arcade like modes, selectable modes. But I disagree. I think they should just keep any mode that's like playable. You don't even have to have maintenance on it. Just like keep it there and available for people who want to. I think the issue is like people have to queue into it, and they might have to like allocate server resources to have like a public queue for it. If anything, they should make it like an accessible custom game mode where you can literally queue into the gauntlet mode, but that might have other limitations as well because of spectator mode and blah, 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 blah. But I think the take where it's why the player base is dwindling, that part's not right. But I do feel like group mastery could be a lot more with some more tender love and care. That part I agree with. The rest, no. Those modes are just never popular. Next hot take, Lifeweaver is the worst support and is a throw pick. Kiri, Bap, Ana, I don't need to explain. Mori does more consistent damage with the same amount of heals. Illari can pop off, Zen and Discord and alter better. Mercy can help a DPS carry. Brig is the best babysitter, and Lucio for speed and disengage. There's nothing he does better than another support other than annoy your teammates like a throwing Mei. The worst support is subjective and dependent on the rank you play in more than anything. Arguably, people say Mercy is like the worst support in like super high elo, unless you just have like the god DPS that like can really capitalize on it. But like if you're forcing Mercy on every map where like you're running a DPS line like Sombra Genji, Sombra Tracer, like what is the Mercy gonna do? And you're forcing the Mercy there, it looks pretty bad. If those are the DPSs that are meta, it's bad. But right now Sojourn's really good, so like Mercy's acceptable, and Lifeweaver ends up being the worst support at that end too. But on the flip side, Lifeweaver is like a B tier support on average for most metal rank players because he doesn't miss his heals, and having that 100% accuracy reliability is more reliable for a lot of players at this rank than anything else. That's why Ana kind of like falls kind of flat. Same with Baptiste, because these players miss their heals and miss their shots because they're not 100% accurate. They're like 50% accurate. Versus Lifeweaver, Moira, Mercy, you can't miss your heals. So then that ends up adding more average value to your team. In any case, you say there's nothing he does better than another support. I'd argue that he does. He out heals almost every support, especially single target wise for a hard pocket. And number two, he does have that defensive capabilities of saving somebody. Yes, Suzu can do it too, Lamp can do it too, but this is an individual pick across the map to save somebody. That's something that he can offer that's unique and better in other ways. Like he's different for sure. He's like reliable, but it's hard to completely win games and swing games, but he can be like a safe crutch for a lot of players. So yeah, I do think he's not a throw pick by any means. You can certainly win with him. Okay, hot take. Forget the 5v5, 6v6 debate. The devs should just go 4v4 like they did in the archives invasion game modes with compensatory buffs for support. Changed my mind. 4v4 is like a thing in Call of Duty Search and Destroy, if I'm not mistaken, right? Unless they switched to 5v5. But I remember playing it as a 4v4. I think based on map design and how open it is, probably no. Counter swapping is as much part of the game identity than no limits and open queue were. Those parts were changed because they made the player experience bad. Counter swapping should be revisited the same way too. While it's nice to swap for a tactical advantage, as they put it, it's awful that a role like tank is required to be able to play the entire tank cast and be required to constantly counterpick to win. The issue stems from the 5v5 role queue model, and as long as counter swapping is that free, tanks will always feel shit to play. P.S. While I get the competitive side of the counter argument, this gameplay style applies to quick play too. The mode where you should be able to play what you want and is for fun, but even if it's for fun, people want to win, so they counter swap, and if you keep your pick as a tank, you ruin the fun of your whole team because you keep a significant disadvantage and get rolled. The more I hear about this argument, the more I am kind of a favor of them removing the swapping alt charge retention. They had it at 25%, brought it down to 15. They could bring it back to 0 so that people don't feel as incentivized to counter swap right away to help the tank experience. I'm actually fine with going back that way. That's number one. Number two, that's like one thing I could revisit and kind of see where it goes. I always disagree with people saying that you have to constantly counter pick to win. That's a hard disagree. There's certainly literally certain tank one tricks that play, never swap, and are like at the top of the leaderboard still. It's a little bit of a crutch to do that as your way to win, because you can certainly win without counter swapping and feeling like you have to. Sometimes skill issue. I always say that like you can always work around like a counter or two. Obviously, if the entire enemy team is countering you and some are like targeted more than others and are easily counterable by multiple heroes like Ryan or Ball, if like all 5 heroes swap, that won't be fun for you. Like there's a difference between getting the win and having a good time. It's not going to be a good time if you play into 5 counters. That's just the way it goes. But if just one tank on the enemy team swaps to something, against you, it doesn't mean it's unplayable. You don't feel like if they swap Zarya and you're D.Va, like you don't have to swap right away. Just play the spacing a little bit differently because Zarya's weakness is range. And not all 5 people always go for you. There's going to be like Tracer players, and Tracer players are supposed to be marking your back line, not you. And then there's going to be like your Mercy players and your Mercy one tricks and stuff who like are not going to be pocketing you as tank. They're going to be like flying around in the, somewhere else. Not all of them will be swapping just to target you as a tank. It may feel that way in some games, but it's not always the case. So, I do think counter swapping is part of the game identity, and I do agree that it should be revisited. Probably start with the alt charge to disincentivize the quick swaps, but you definitely don't need to constantly do it to win. Abilities that are similar just look identical. Sigma, Vortex, and D.Va Matrix. That's a cold take. What? Vortex? I think Sigma's Vortex and D.Va's Matrix look completely different visually, first of all, and their hitboxes are very different. D.Va's is way longer. Number 2, hot take. Overwatch will never be a successful esport if it's too confusing for spectators. I mean, I'd argue that Overwatch has already been a successful esport already in Overwatch 1 with more confusion because of 6v6 and more visual clutter than ever before. It's already been successful. It may not have hit the marks that like the high mark that everybody anticipated at first, but that goes for all of esports and a lot of investment. Like a lot of orgs like TSM, like all the investment, especially in like 2018, 2019, 2020, like I don't know what it is with esports owners, but they were able to sell snake oils to some giga-rich investors and tell them that this is going to be the next big NFL and the big sports thing. Like, it certainly has our niche audience, and it is pretty big, especially like games like League and stuff. But by all accounts and measures, Overwatch was successful in its own way, like having a pretty decent player base compared to a lot of games. When you compare it to, I don't know, like the official Rocket League esports or like the NBA 2K League, where I know they literally in Toronto, they field a freaking Toronto Raptors 901 or something, 905 2K League team. And I'm like, are people really watching 2K League esports? There's probably a smaller niche audience, but all things considered, Overwatch is doing pretty well. And that's not me just kissing their ass, like objectively, without being like that I hate Overwatch and Overwatch is not successful. Like they've objectively had a pretty good run. 100k, 200, 300k views during some grand finals in 2018, 2019, 2020. Overwatch 2 definitely down a bit. Overwatch CS DreamHack Major is happening this weekend. The teams are a bit harder to follow now because there's no like big name brand like 100 Thieves or whatever that bought a team. Only like Toronto Defiant and a couple of like Overwatch endemic esports names are in there, but no Cloud9 or anything. But if they do re-enter, I'm sure like it would spark some more eyeballs once again. Okay, last hot take of the week. I'm glad that Reinhardt is unplayable. He is such a brain-dead hero. He's just a caveman with the big stick that unga-bungas at people he requires. And he requires both supports to dump all the resources into him to make him work, and it isn't fun to play with one on your team. The sooner you get to fundamental rework that encourages actual skill expression, the better. Okay, my next hot take is that Ryan is playable. He's just unplayable in high ranks if three or more people swap to counter it, which is usually the case because in high competitive lobbies, people do, for the most part, counter swap. Not always, there's always going to be one tricks, but they do counter swap to play against and try to win, and it makes it pretty unplayable there. But I think the data from both Blizzard and Overbuff, and I know Overbuff isn't completely accurate, but you know, Blizzard dev Josh No also said Overbuff does have a decent enough sample size. It's not completely accurate because there's no context in the stats, but with a bit of standard deviation, it's relatively accurate. And Ryan just absolutely pummels metal ranks and below because he holds a shield, unga bunga, and he can be immediate value if he just swings his hammer a few times on people. People don't target focus him, people don't counter pick him as often, so he kind of owns in most medium ranks. And I would argue that it is kind of fun to play with one on your team. What do you mean? I love playing with Reinhardt. I think it's pretty cool. It's a classic. And you say he needs a rework that encourages actual skill expression. His skill expression is all about like decision making, when to swing, when to shield, when to take space, when to back up. Yes, there isn't mechanical skill because you just hold the button down to hold a shield and swing a shield and throw a hammer. The only thing you have to really aim is fire strike. But there's a lot of heroes in that game that have a lower mechanical skill expression, but skill expression is more than just mechanics. It is your positioning, it is your game sense, it is how you macro, how you move, your ult tracking, how to like flick your shield and shadow the people behind. That's all part of Overwatch. Your movement, your like, everybody thinks skill is just mechanics, but that's also a very linear way of thinking. All right, cool. Disagree with this take, and that is all for this week's hot takes. Thanks for listening to me yap. See you next week. Enjoy the grand finals, or sorry, the Overwatch DreamHack finals for season 1 and 2. I think both seasons were clumped together. Yeah, here at DreamHack, I will be having drops on my channel for I'm one of the official co-streamers Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If you tune into the stream, you get the exclusive Twitch drop. So come to twitch.tv/KarQ Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Have a good time. We'll watch the matches, eat some popcorn. We'll talk Overwatch. All right, see you there. Bye-bye.